G'day guys, I'm just working here in my nursery. This is where all the vertical garden magic, the maintenance side of things, where the nitty-gritty of the work happens. So I just thought this would be a great opportunity to do a quick little video to talk about how to successfully and sustainably maintain vertical gardens long into the future. And to do it, I've broken it down into a series of steps. Step number one is early planning. So early planning is critical for successful vertical gardens. So when you're thinking about designing a vertical garden or thinking about designing anything, the very first thing that we need to think about is plants. Plants should be the first thing we think about before designing any building that we're going to be working or spending any amount of time in. And by doing it, we can eventually result in better designs that are healthier and nicer to live in. So once we start thinking about this, we can ask ourselves, what sort of plants are we going to grow? Do we want to grow edibles or ornamentals, rainforest species or desert succulents? And what are the needs of those plants, and how can we alter our design in a way that's going to support those plants that we're growing? Step number two is light. All plants need light. So plants have evolved to grow outdoors. There's no such thing as an indoor plant, really. They've all evolved to grow in outdoor settings, and even in the darkest shaded rainforest, the plants are still getting bright, indirect, filtered light. So we need to make sure that our plants are getting adequate lighting, and if we can alter our designs in a way that allows lots of natural, beautiful lighting in, then it's going to be a lot easier to maintain in the long run. If it's not something that we can do, then we need to bring in artificial lighting, and we can bring in a range of LED, which will be in the blue-red spectrum. If that's not suitable, then you can go to something like metal halide or halogen lights that are going to have the white light, but also really enable those plants to photosynthesize and grow. Step number three is the right temperature, the humidity, and good airflow. So having right temperature for the species and the humidity for the species that we're trying to grow is really critical. A lot of the species that people like to use in vertical gardens are rainforest or tropical type of plants. So we've got to make sure you've got the right temperature for those species. Step number four is moisture and irrigation. So set up irrigation system and monitor the moisture levels. One of the most challenging things for vertical gardens irrigation wise is getting a nice even spread of water and setting the right balance between a diverse range of species that you'll have growing under one irrigation system, and trying to pick the right balance so you're not giving them too much and you're not giving them inadequate amount that's going to result in getting dry patches across the wall. So it's a constant fine-tuning, monitoring and adjusting for the season. Step number five is having a good nutrition plan. So your plants are going to need a healthy diet, and having a healthy diet is the best way to prevent against pest and disease. So having irrigation to set up with nutrition is really important. You can set up a nutrient tank, which is going to enable your plants to get irrigated with nutrient-rich water. And you're also going to be able to put in manually fertilizers, rock minerals, trace elements, and even microbes. You can also foliar feed your plants as well. So you can spray the leaves with a liquid seaweed or a fertilizer, and that'll really give them a good boost. And doing that as well also washes the leaves. So especially if it's indoors, washing the leaves of your vertical gardens to get that dust off them is really important. Step number six is access. So we need to be able to access your vertical garden, and the easier it is to access, the easier it will be to maintain. But that being said, don't shy away from putting your vertical gardens in those really hard to reach locations, because sometimes they're the spots that will have the biggest wow factor impact on people. One of the biggest things we want to do with vertical gardens is inspire people to the beauty of nature and help change perspectives around the natural world. So get creative with it. We can use a range of ladders, scissor lifts, cherry pickers, rope access, and even abseiling to access your vertical garden. So I like to challenge people to think about how they're going to access it, have an access plan in mind. That being said, get creative with your design. So step number 7 is drainage. if we're going to get water there to your vertical garden, we need to be able to also run water away from the location. So having a good drainage system is really important. And of course, we do try to run the vertical gardens at their optimal trans-evaporation rate. So the amount that the plants are using, the amount they're transpiring, and the amounts they're evaporating, we can calculate that to try and get the optimal irrigation setting so it's not dripping too much or at all. But there will be times when we do need to flush those irrigation systems, and we may need to run them for a really long lengths of time. So having good drainage is really important. And I just get to the stage now where I say, think of your vertical garden like a water feature and set it up in the same way. And for that reason, drainage is critical. So that's all the steps involved in maintaining, but there's some extra things that I would like to acknowledge that we need to consider. And one of them is technology. So technology can make it a lot easier to maintain vertical gardens. And we can set up systems and controllers that connect to the internet and that monitor the water flow. So if there's any issue with irrigation stops, or if it's flowing too much, then we get a message sent directly to us. We can also measure fertilizer, temperature, humidity, light levels, and we can have these set to thresholds that are going to send us warning messages if it drops below or above. So if it's getting too much light or too hot, too cold, it can tell us about that before it becomes a problem for the plants. So a lot of vertical gardens will have thousands and thousands of dollars worth of plants in them. So having a little bit of extra tech set up to help protect those plants is a really good idea. And there's actually been some cases where it's really come into its own. We had a vertical garden that we used to look after, and one of the plumbers came in to do some extra work and actually just forgot to turn the tap back on after he'd had it turned off. But luckily we had the Wi-Fi enabled irrigation controller set up, and it was able to send us a message straight away as soon as it missed its irrigation that there was an irregular flow of water. And I got the notification, I was able to go in and check it out. I saw that the tap had been turned off, I turned it back on, and it was problem solved, no plants lost. So it saved them a lot of money and a big headache. So technology is something that's it's so much out there to look at and learn about, and something we should really embrace. So another thing to think about is costs. How much is it going to cost to have this maintenance service put in place? Well, a good rule of thumb is to think anywhere between 10 to 20% of the initial install costs of the vertical garden. You need to expect to spend that each year on ongoing maintenance. So for example, if your vertical garden cost $20,000 to install, then 15% of that is $3,000, and you could expect that that's what it's going to cost each year to maintain. So when you get all these things working together, you can get really healthy, sustained green walls or vertical gardens or living infrastructure. So I think, getting these things working together is really critical, and we can think about them right from the get-go and think plants from the very beginning of any design built infrastructure that we want to do, and we end up with better designs. Like a good bottle of wine, vertical gardens should get better with age, and with the right maintenance package and plan and care, there's no reason why they just can't keep growing, keep enhancing, and keep getting more better, more beautiful. And we can really get the value that green infrastructure and the power of horticulture can be expressed through those vertical gardens, and we can experience it. So thanks very much for listening, and don't forget to subscribe if you want to hear more of these sort of videos, and enjoy the natural highs of vertical gardening, and talk soon.